Hello and welcome. We all want to be protectors for the people we care about. But what does that really look like day to day? Today, we're going to dive into a story about foresight, about diligence, and about finding the exact right tool for the job, especially when those stakes are incredibly high. Hey everyone, I'm Ivan from Evergreen Life and Health Agency. And honestly, this is a question that hits home for a lot of us, right? Whether you're providing for a whole family or just planning for your own future, it really comes down to this: understanding the real risks we face and making sure our plans are strong enough to handle whatever comes our way. So let's really dig into that. What does it actually mean to be a true protector? I mean, is it just about taking care of the day-to-day stuff, or is it something more? Is it about being ready for the things you just don't see coming?
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to start with part one of our story, a watchman's duty. Think of this as a deep dive into what diligence and care really look like through the eyes of a man who took his role as a protector, well, very seriously.
So let's meet our guy, David. David's 45. He's a construction foreman. And you can imagine, his job is all about precision, about being constantly aware of risk. And that mindset, yeah, that doesn't just stay on the job site. He brings it right home to his family.
To his family, David is everything. He's their provider, he's their rock. And that responsibility, he doesn't take it lightly at all. He sees it as the sacred, almost God-given trust. And out on the job, his crew knows him as the Watchman, the guy who's always looking out for them.
And this quote, this is basically the principle David lives his whole life by. For him, it's not just about wearing a hard hat or clipping into a safety harness. Nope. It's his whole philosophy. It's all about having the wisdom to see what could happen and planning for it before it does.
But here's the thing. No matter how careful you are, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, of testing just how prepared you really are. And that brings us to part two, a moment of danger. This is where that little what if in the back of your mind suddenly becomes real. Okay, so picture this. It's one of those scorching hot afternoons. David and his crew, they're way up high working on the steel skeleton of a new skyscraper. The whole city is just spread out beneath them like a map. And then, bam! Out of absolutely nowhere, this massive gust of wind just slams into them. The whole structure rattles. It's this sudden, jarring reminder of the raw, unpredictable forces they're up against every single day. And in that exact split second, one of the younger guys on the crew, he gets distracted for just a moment. He loses his footing, and he stumbles, way too close to the edge. David doesn't even have time to think. It's pure instinct. He just lunges, grabs the guy, and yanks him back from the brink. Just like that, a life saved in a heartbeat. The actual danger was over in like 2 seconds. But for David, the incident was far from over. That chilling question, what if, it just started echoing in his head over and over, forcing him to look at his own situation. Yeah, that close call, it really forced David to take a hard look at the protections he had set up for his own family. And that leads us right into part three, a gap in the fortress. This is where he starts to question everything he thought he had figured out. So later that evening, he's at home, and the image of what happened is just burned into his mind. He's watching his kids play in the backyard, totally safe, totally oblivious, and this really heavy question starts to settle on his shoulders. And that's when it hit him hard. Was there a gap, a weak spot in this fortress he'd worked so hard to build around his family? He's the Watchman, right? It's his job to find that weakness before it's too late. Now look, David's a responsible guy. He already had a solid term life policy in place, but now he's wondering, is that really enough? Is that general one-size-fits-all protection really designed for the unique, kind of scary risks he faces every single day on the job? So that question sent him on a mission. He started searching for an answer. And he realized he wasn't just looking for more protection, he needed the right kind of protection. Which brings us to part four, a targeted shield. It's all about finding the right tool for the job. And his research led him to something called Accidental Death and Dismemberment insurance. You'll probably see it called AD&D. It's a really specialized kind of coverage. It's designed for two main things. One, it pays your family if you have a fatal accident. But, and this is key, it also pays benefits if you have a severe career-ending injury. Exactly the kind of thing that could happen in a job like David's. He also found out about something called a Double Indemnity Rider. This is basically a powerful add-on to a regular life insurance policy.
And the thinking behind it is pretty smart. An accidental death is usually sudden, right? It leaves a family with zero time to prepare, financially or emotionally. So this rider, it provides a massive extra layer of security for that very specific, very devastating event.
Let's just put some simple numbers on this so you can see how it works. Okay, let's say David's regular life insurance policy was for $500,000. That's a solid amount of protection for sure. But if he had that double indemnity rider, that payout jumps to $1 million if his death was from a covered accident. Think about that. The exact same event, but literally double the financial security for his family, right when they need it the most. For David, this was a total game changer. So by finding these very specific tools, David was able to patch up that hole he saw in his financial fortress. And this brings us to our conclusion, part 5, a prudent peace. This is what you get when you're exceptionally diligent. You know, taking this extra step, it wasn't driven by fear. It was about wisdom. It was a pretty small thing, really, but it gave him this huge sense of security. He could finally rest easy, knowing he'd done everything a good watchman could do. He had truly, completely fulfilled his duty. And so, David's story really leaves us with a question for ourselves, doesn't it? It's a prompt to look at our own unique lives, our own risks, and ask that same tough question. Is my fortress truly secure? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.